if you're going to teach in the sphere of personal preservation, then there can't be caveats to that. Every human being has a right to self-preserve, and there's no asterisk. You're sort of caught off guard when someone shows up to class and you spent the last 10, 20 years telling everybody, reach over the top of your slide with the overhand grip, pull it back, open up your hand, let it go. And now here's someone who only has 2 fingers on their hand.
Right.
And this is where we have to ask ourselves, are we conflating the end and the means? If the end is our primary objective, then we've got lots of options for means, But if we blur the line between the two and we start becoming wedded to the means that we always use, then we lose sight of the end goal, and we don't have the creativity to find alternate routes to get to that intended end goal.
If you're new or watching this as a replay, welcome. We're so glad that you're here. Please subscribe to Defenders Live on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube, and join our group on Facebook as well. And if you don't want to miss another episode, you can sign up for email notifications at defenders-live.com. Tiffany Johnson calls herself a late bloomer who underwent a 180-degree conversion in the world of firearms. She grew up subscribing to the common fears and misconceptions about guns and gun owners. After college, she reluctantly enrolled in a Rangemaster handgun safety course, and she was hooked. Her interests in training have expanded from handguns to shotguns and carbines. In addition to being mentored by Tom and Lynn Givens and other Rangemaster instructors, Tiffany is also trained under Jim Higginbotham, John Farnham, Craig Douglas, Masad Ayub, and many other respected veterans of the self-defense community. She's a member of the NRA and the Second Amendment Foundation, and she has earned instructor credentials from the state of Tennessee, the state of Mississippi, the National Rifle Association, the United States Concealed Carry Association, Masad Ayub Group, and Rangemaster Master Instructor Certification. So I am looking forward to this interview with Tiffany Johnson. Let's bring her onto the show. Hey, Tiffany.
Hi, Laura. How are you?
Hi. I am so happy to see you again. This
Same
is,
here.
I think you're setting new records on Defenders Live, because I think this is the 3rd appearance.
Uh-oh. Wow. Your listeners are gluttons for punishment, apparently.
No, they love you. They love you. And I love you too. We first met in 2023, I believe, towards the beginning of the year was the first episode that I did with you. And we connected on a level. I don't know what it was, but yes, we definitely connected. So I asked you back again, and we did a second episode. So you guys should go back and watch those. They're on YouTube. But there were a couple things that we didn't get to, and I had the fortunate honor of getting to meet you at a Girl in a Gun National Conference this past year in April. So we finally got to meet face to face. I finally got a hug from Tiffany.
Yes.
Yes. And so we said, hey, we have some unfinished business we need to talk about, and this is important for people, especially regarding physical limitations on the range, in having students coming in that have physical limitations. And you have some personal experience with this. So could you enlighten us on not only your own personal journey, but how that has bled into you as an instructor for other people with physical limitations?
Sure. So first of all, thank you for the amazing intro. And I assure you the honor is all mine. And on that note, I want to commend you for even taking an interest in these kinds of topics. I really love how your show is built around what insights training gives us to the broader perspective on life. Yeah. I think that we sell our students and the training community short when we isolate it in this little box, like it's fantasy band camp that we go and do, and then we move on with our lives. But truth be told, especially if people want to train in a way that makes this occupation worth anything, it has to be integrated in your entire life. There can't be separate boxes. So that includes whatever limitations or any other factors an individual brings with him or her to the table when they enter the training community. My journey has been interesting. It's been full of ups and downs. Anybody who bumps into me often in the training world may have noticed that I sometimes walk with a limp, that you might have seen me using a cane. And basically, I won't go into the crazy weeds kinds of details, but essentially, I imagine if you have arthritis, except you have arthritis in every major joint, and it's severe late stage arthritis. My joints have been bone on bone since I was a teenager. And so I've had probably about 10 surgeries, and I've had 3 or 4 total joint replacements, and I've got a couple more that are
I
coming
had
soon.
no idea.
Yeah. So
Wow.
so movement for me is usually painful.
Mm.
The only time my pain is minimized is when I'm completely at rest, like laying in a bed. And even then, like I have several support pillows in my bed that I have to prop under certain joints. Like I have to put a pillow under my knee. I have to put pillows under my shoulders so that gravity doesn't pull them beyond their comfort zone.
Yeah.
So that's me.
Wow.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy.
Wow. I had no idea. Because when I met you, you were sitting in the back of a vehicle, resting,
Mhm,
but I had
mhm.
not seen you like walking around.
Yeah.
I didn't notice anything because you were just sitting there and I just gave you a hug and I had no idea.
Well, first of all, thank you, because I love hugs. I totally feed off hugs. Anybody who's ever seen me knows that. So I apologize in advance to anybody who's creeped out by unsolicited hugs, because I will just hand them out.
Me too. I
Um,
apologize. I'm that way too.
but yeah, I have to build my day around pain levels. So a lot
Yeah.
of times, like I'm kind of infamous for my baggy clothes. Part of that is just because I'm comfortable in baggy clothes. I always have been. I grew up around boys. I'm a tomboy. And so I have no desire to wear fitted clothing. But another part of that is a lot of times I will have all kinds of braces on under
Oh.
my clothes, and they won't fit if my clothing is fitted. So
Mm-hmm.
so when I'm teaching, for example, I have to, do I've got to scope out the area first. I have to see what the terrain is like. I have to make sure I'm wearing the right kind of shoes. I've got to make sure that there's something that I can lean on
Mm-hmm.
within pretty close proximity, or a seat. I also can't sit in low chairs because I can't get up. My knees don't bend all the way, so I can't use low seats at all, including in public restrooms. I always have to use the accessible restroom. So there's a lot going on. And when I do an event like A Girl and a Gun, where you're
Yeah.
on your feet for 3.5 hours,
Yeah.
there's times when I finish that and just go in the car and bawl,
No
because
kidding.
yeah, it's
Wow.
torturous. Yeah.
Wow. Okay. So I have to say this out loud because you're not letting this stop you. You are not making excuses for anything. I know able-bodied people that that say things and they're off the range for way less things than what I mean. I admire you even more now because you're not letting this stop you. So this mission that you're on must be bigger than your limitations.
I think so. And I'm trying to not, well, two things. Number one, yes, I agree that if you're going to teach in the sphere of personal preservation, then there can't be caveats to that. Every human
Mm-hmm.
being has a right to self-preserve, and there's no asterisk.
Mm-hmm.
So that's number one. If you're serious about this, then you've got to widen your lane as far as
Mm-hmm.
what students you're willing and able to teach, and more importantly, accommodate. I see far too often instructors who almost kind of judge students who bring their true selves to class. Like, how dare you show up with arthritis, suck it
Mm-hmm.
up, kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I get it if we're at boot camp, or if this is SEAL Team 6 or whatever, but it's not. It's, I'm a 46-year-old overweight, disabled, plain Jane person who just wants to have some options available if
Right.
somebody kicks in the door. Like, that's all I am. I have no desire to save the world, or be some kind of helicopter scaling badass or anything like that. I have zero interest in that. I'm not a tactical Timmy at all.
Yeah.
So anyway.
So that changes things. So let's talk about that from the student perspective. So not only you are having to work around your limitations as an instructor, but what does that mean for someone coming into a class as far as their expectations and fears are concerned is one way to look at it. But then also as an instructor, you have to look at their situation and say, okay, for you, this is what you're going to have to consider and look at for a self-defense situation, perhaps differently than a more able-bodied person. Do you know what I'm getting at there?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. And I mean, to revisit the earlier, your previous question, I mean, I said I had kind of two responses to that. And the first was, yes, the mission is bigger. But the second is, it's kind of like a chess game. You see these challenges and you're like, okay, game on. How can I frame this as an ability, or a diversity, as opposed to a limitation only? I'm not one of those pie in the sky type folks who's just going to say, oh, this isn't a limitation at all. Of course it is. But that's not the end of the story. It can
Yeah.
also be an asset depending
Yeah.
on, what challenge you're facing. It helps me anyway, to try and reframe challenges as opportunities. And I know that's a little cliche,
I love that.
but that's kind of that's the only way I can tackle it. So as far as students coming in the door, again, I don't want to be the one who prematurely dispossesses every student of any personal responsibility or agency, because that's just as bad. Assuming that a student can't do anything is just as bad as assuming a student can do everything.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to really make a genuine effort to gauge honestly, both based on and in spite of the student's understanding of himself or herself, what exactly the parameters are for that student. So it could be that you, the instructor, just need to find another way around things. Sometimes it can make you a stronger and better instructor because you move more towards what they call in the academic community universal design for learning, which is learning design that isn't dependent on certain, majority attributes like vision or physical, strength or that sort of thing. That's certainly an ideal. There's no such thing as a design that fits everybody, but it is a worthy aspiration. And the more you strive towards accommodating everybody, the more people you accommodate, even if it's technically impossible to ever accommodate everyone. So,
Right.
if someone shows up to your class and they have one arm, or they are missing fingers, or they're wheelchair bound, and maybe you have a rule in your class that a person in a wheelchair can't follow, that's an opportunity for you as an instructor to really interrogate that rule and say, well, what is the actual purpose of this rule? What is it serving? And if it's indispensable, then that's one thing. But 9 times out of 10, it's not. It's just kind of window dressing that instructors perpetuate because this is how we've always done it. And if you're open-minded and you say, well, do I really need this rule, or what is the end goal of this rule? Oftentimes there are other ways you can accomplish the same goal that accommodate students who may not have been able to meet the rule as it previously stood. Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally. Yeah, because I've had examples of this in my classes, and totally unexpected. I had a gal who I don't know if she'd had a stroke, but she had almost no use of her left arm. It was kind of like a meat hook. That's how much use she had of it. And then she had almost zero strength in her strong hand shooting finger, her main finger. So she had to shoot with her middle finger. And the biggest problem that we ran into was, how is she safely going to rack the slide? Because she was right hand dominant and her left hand wasn't very helpful. She figured out a way, and it was cool because it wasn't me having to figure it out. People with limitations have to figure stuff out all the time. So if you just give them the freedom to do it within these safety parameters, keep your gun pointed in a safe direction or direction of least consequence, and keep your finger off the trigger and figure it out with a dry gun. And that's exactly what happened. And she ended up being the top shooter in the class.
Nice. See, I love stories like that. And it reminds me,
inspirational to me.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I'm gonna use a term that has a lot of baggage and sometimes turns people off, especially in certain political circles. But the term is privilege. And I'll throw that out there, even though I know it's a lightning rod, because a lot of people misunderstand what that means. The term privilege doesn't mean that you were born with the silver spoon in your mouth. There are lots of people who enjoy privileges who also enjoy hardships. And so it's limited to specific domains. Privilege simply means that under your circumstances, you have the luxury of taking something for granted. I have the luxury of taking for granted that I can get an overhand grip on the slide and pull it back.
Okay.
That's a privilege for me. And so the difficulty with privilege is that you can develop blind spots and start to take things for granted. And so you're sort of caught off guard when someone shows up to class and you spent the last 10, 20 years telling everybody, reach over the top of your slide with an overhand grip, pull it back, open up your hand, let it go. And now here's someone who only has 2 fingers on their hand.
Right.
And this is where we have to ask ourselves, are we conflating the end and the means? If the end is our primary objective, then we've got lots of options for means, but if we blur the line between the two and we start becoming wedded to the means that we always use, then we lose sight of the end goal and we don't have the creativity to find alternate routes to get to that intended end goal. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. And those people coming into classes, I think about, oh gosh, what if they what if they signed up for a class and they did get one of those instructors that was very black and white? And I mean, imagine how uncomfortable, ashamed, all the adjectives are coming to my mind of
Yeah.
not treating that person with respect and knowing that they probably can do this. We probably can figure this out.
Yeah.
But then being dismissed maybe, or just kind of being left out in the dark and not getting the help that they really need. That's what's coming to mind for me.
Yeah. I mean, something you said earlier can't be emphasized enough. And that is people who live day in and day out with these sorts of challenges are the experts.
Yeah.
Nobody knows better than them what they need to make it through their daily activities. And so shame on instructors who assume that they know best and try to impose their, their sort of constructed solutions on these people. The best thing that you can do, I think, in most instances is just ask them. Like, we had someone call us one time and say, hey, I'm in a wheelchair. Can I take your class? And we were like, yeah, but what do you need? Let's talk about this. And then, and they went through this list, like thresholds for doors, door width, turn radius, all kinds of stuff. Like that person educated us on what was a blind spot because of our privilege. I have the privilege of 2 legs that I can stand on and walk on, albeit painfully. I can still do it. I have no idea what it's like to, live most of my waking hours in a chair. I just have no concept of that. So the person who has done that since childhood is best equipped to tell me what they need, if anything, from me. Because like you said, it could very well be that they don't need a damn thing. And, we're just assuming that they're, how can I help you? And maybe they don't need anything from us.
Right. So. Yeah, that's really good. I'm so glad that we're talking about this. Actually, I just did an interview recently with a paraplegic, and she's not like in the firearms space. She's actually a resiliency coach. And yeah, she's really good at her job, and for good reason, right?
Yeah,
but she talks about that too. And it's really interesting how even not meaning to, sometimes we can be so insensitive to other people. And so I think as an instructor, we talk about the EQ, the emotional intelligence quotient. I think that needs to be even more honed in and looked at and paid attention to, wouldn't you say, in situations like this?
Yeah, no, I totally agree. There's a trainer who works a lot with Citizen Safety Academy called Dr. Jimmy Turner, whose entire doctoral scholarship was on EQ, and he's working on programs for raising EQ among instructors. And I hate that oftentimes in the community, things like that get poo-pooed. They're kind of shunned as sort of tree huggy and, but it's really
what it really means, though. Maybe people just have a misperception of what it means.
And that's what I was going to say. It's not, if you've ever taken a class like a ECQC from Craig Douglas or a Muck and you've learned how to thin slice, that's EQ. I mean, anything that we're doing to read the room or to make snap judgments based on limited information, a lot of that has to do with emotional intelligence. And there is, to be clear, some debate in the academic community in the world of cognitive psychology about the efficacy of this kind of concept, multiple intelligences and things like that. But it's kind of like saying there's a debate in the firearms world about, Cooper's 4 rules versus the NRA's 3 rules. You can argue over it if you've got nothing better to do with your time, or you can kind of look beneath the surface and again, not get hung up on the forest for the trees and see that at the end of the day, they're really not that different. Yeah. So this whole idea of multiple intelligences or emotional intelligence, that sort of thing, anybody who says, that's a bunch of hogwash, and then they go out and decide not to get in the elevator because of something that they sensed, that's EQ. I mean, you're using it every day.
Right. Yeah. We talked earlier about not only physical limitations, but emotional limitations, which you and I can relate to. It turns out we both are introverts. I know it comes as a shock to all of you, but it is true. Yeah. And so I know you'll be speaking for me when you talk about this, but talk about what those emotional limitations can be for me as an instructor. When I'm done with a class, like I am exhausted.
Yep. You took the word right out of my mouth.
So exhausted. Yep, I have given everything I can give. So explain that process. The thing is, though, not everyone's going to relate to this because it turns out, I just learned, only a quarter of the population are introverts. Did you know that?
I did not.
Yeah. So
interesting.
A quarter
So
of the people watching this will understand.
there you go. So there's a difference, first of all, between being introverted and being antisocial. That's one thing.
Yeah.
But I am very much like you. I have an extreme form of introversion to the point where it causes anxiety attacks that I've learned to manage. So kind of like pain, it's not something that'll be on full display, but it's being felt and kind of hidden inside for purposes of getting a job done. But then, like you said, afterwards, just the task of managing that requires so much mental and physical energy that you are utterly spent in every way, shape, or form, in every sense of the word, as in like just ran, a 50-mile marathon, want to get in the bed and sleep for a week, kind of exhausted, like absolutely barely lift my limbs, kind of exhausted.
Wow.
Being in a large room with a bunch of people, absolutely. I won't say it terrifies me because I have learned to manage it, but it is not my happy place. Let's put it like that.
Yeah.
Okay? And that's even with a room full of people that I know. So if you're talking about strangers, like a concert or something like that, yeah, there's no way.
Totally understand that.
No way.
That's so funny. So then this thing popped in my head as soon as you were talking about that. For the people that are listening, I'm thinking they might be wondering, if this wears you out so much and this isn't your thing, but it is your thing, then why do you continue to do it?
It's a great question.
Have you asked yourself that question?
I have, and I've argued with myself over it. And to be clear and honest, there are times where you have to say no. Like I'm sure you understand and can relate. There are times when, say for example, I have to step away from social media, or I have an event and I just have to call it off. There's times when I have things happening at work and I just have to say, you know what, I'm sorry, something's come up, I've got to reschedule. That does happen. So it's not like you're always just muscling through it.
Yeah.
And part of being honest with yourself, knowing yourself, being true to yourself, is recognizing when you've reached that point and not continuing to torture yourself needlessly. That's something that I am working on, because I'll just go and go and go and go until I have a nervous breakdown, and I can't do that, But why do I do it? The rewards outweigh the costs. And selfishly, a lot of the rewards I reap in my own life, it's not just about altruism, like, for example, here's a perfect example. When Tom Gibbons, my mentor, asked the Rangemaster staff a couple of years ago to codify the Rangemaster teaching philosophy, we came up with the 10 principles. And anybody who's a Rangemaster certified instructor who's ever gone to the Rangemaster instructor reunion will have heard our talk on the 10 principles. There's 10 things that, kind of govern the way Tom's instructional style works. And one of them is front sight focus, sighted fire, to put it in more modern terms in the era of red dots. And, we were kind of just throwing ideas around about this concept of front sight focus or sighted fire among the staff. It was me, John Hearn, Akil Kadir, Lee Weems. And it blew up into something much bigger than, putting the front sight equally in between the rear sight notch. And there was this thing called the philosophical front sight that we sort of jokingly talked about, but it's kind of not a joke. And for me, that is the idea of being able to maintain a singular purpose and focus at one moment in time. For anybody who's ever struggled with like obsessive compulsive disorder or ADHD or things like that, or any kind of attentiveness issues, the broader kind of figurative meaning of the front sight has actually enriched my life, because I have struggled since I was a child to maintain focus. I'm so jealous of people who can just sit on a rocking chair and read an entire novel from cover to cover. I've never, as much as I love books, I would kill to be able to do that. I've never been able to do that because it's just like squirrels and shiny things all over everywhere. Yeah. And so the front sight was a way to train my brain to be able to settle. It was a way for me to find stillness in the chaotic frenzy of life. And that applies, this show is all about how guns are about life. And that applies to my entire life. I use that every day. Yeah. So Yeah.
Totally agree with you. On point. All of it's on point. As always, Tiffany. I always know when I meet you, see you, there's going to be a gold nugget
See,
bomb.
we're
Gold nugget bombs going off.
we're on the same wavelength, you and I knew it from the first time I talked to you.
Isn't that weird how you're in Tennessee, right? And I'm in Montana,
Yeah.
and through the screen, it's just so cool. I don't know.
Yeah,
It's just so cool. It's so
it
funny
is.
that you mentioned about, not loving to be in a large group of people. Can totally relate to that. In fact, day one of A Girl and a Gun National Conference, this was the first year that I attended.
Mm.
It was a bit much for me at first.
Mm-hmm.
What were there? Over 700 women all on the same gun range.
Mm-hmm.
And if it hadn't been for my friend, Adam Winch, who drug me by the ear.
Hi, Adam.
Talking, hey, you should talk to this person. You should talk. And I'm just like, are you sure?
Yeah.
Do I really need to talk to them? And, oh, yeah, you do. And if
Yeah.
it wasn't for him breaking the ice with people, and then being so kind and so generous, genuinely, they weren't faking it. It was real.
Yeah.
If it wasn't for that, I don't know that I would have been able to come out of my shell the way that I did.
Yeah.
And that experience for me was so helpful in so many ways, because it's not usually like me to just put myself in that situation on my own.
Mm-hmm.
And so to have people in your life that help grow you in the ways that you need to grow is just so valuable. Like I can't emphasize enough how all of us need people like that in our corner that can see things in us that we can't see in ourselves, and then lovingly push us.
Absolutely. I happen to believe that introverts and extroverts make good pairs.
Yeah.
Because there's a good kind of yin and yang happening there. My best friend on earth is the world's biggest social butterfly. I mean, she puts the extra in extrovert, and she makes fun of me never wanting to do any of the things she wants to do. And every now and then she'll just kind of, like you said, gently nudge me, and it helps because being an introvert is tiring. So it's nice to have help and support. And you asked why I do this. That meeting people like the ones you just described, that is fuel for me. It's odd because it's not often that an introvert loves hugs as much as I do. I totally will hug a perfect stranger, even though I'm an introvert. Yeah. And that has to do a little bit, I think, with the intersection between my introversion and my another issue that I deal with, which you probably do too, I would guess, is empathy, being an empath.
Yeah.
So one of the reasons I think that I'm an introvert is because I have zero emotional filters at all. And everybody's emotions come straight through to my brain and my heart. Like, so when I'm in a room with 700 people, I feel the weight of all of their emotional baggage. It just sort of comes right on in. And so it's a huge burden. Yeah. And so when I hug people, I just kind of feel like a moment of sharing. It's almost sort of offloading. And it is a momentary interaction too. Like I can hug somebody and get the heck out of Dodge, as opposed to maintaining, an hour of small talk, which would make me want to leap off the nearest tall building.
I love your honesty. That is hilarious. So this is how I'm just saying this like girl to girl, this is what has helped me with that, because I have struggled with that my entire life. For me, what I've learned as I've gotten older is I've learned how to figure out, and I can't tell you how I learned it, but I think through being aware, I have learned how to figure out what is mine and what is theirs. So instead of it all turning into one big mushy pit of stuff, right? I've learned how to figure out how to separate what is mine and what is theirs. And not that I don't let any of that in, but I'm learning how to make that filter so I can control. I can feel it, but I don't have to keep it.
Yeah.
Before I didn't have control of that.
That's a good strategy. And I have been working on that for years, still a work in progress, but I am aspiring to get to where you are. So thank you for the inspiration.
Well, it's not easy. And really the key to it, I think, is awareness. And you and I have keen awareness. So I think let's use that sense in a way to help protect ourselves.
Yes.
And
my therapist calls it boundaries. Every therapist talks about boundaries, but it's important, even with people who are close to you in your life, your your nuclear family, your
Mhm.
closest friends, your colleagues that you're with every day. You have to know how to set up those boundaries.
Mhm.
And that's something that I've gotten better at. It is a skill
It
that
is.
has to be honed just like any other. And I
Yep.
used to completely suck at it, which is why I
Mhm.
was such an emotional, like, train wreck, dumpster
Yeah.
fire.
Yep.
But I'm getting better. Like, those boundaries build the cubby holes that you can
Mhm.
then put different people's baggage into, so
Mhm.
that you're not ignoring it, but you're also not mixing it in with your stuff, like you said.
Right. Right.
And that's critical. I'm still working on it. By the way, little aside there, big shout out for therapy. I know that's another one of those words that a lot of people like to dodge.
Yeah.
I'm a firm believer that every human being should see a therapist, just like you have your annual checkup. Like, we all need a checkup every now and then.
Tune
We
up.
all do. It
Yeah.
has nothing to do with you being sick or crazy or none of that. It's
Yeah.
you get a checkup for your body, you need to get a checkup for your mind and your heart at the same time.
I totally agree. I think it's no different than having, like, if you have decided that physical fitness is important to you, and you hire a coach that fits you well, that knows your goals and knows what you're capable and not capable of. It's no different. It's
Mhm.
emotional fitness,
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And you have to maintain it. Like, you are a
Yes.
steward of your own emotional self. And if
Yes.
you don't maintain it, then, it's going to have the same fate as anything else that you sit in the windowsill and let wither in the sun.
Totally agree. It's hard work, though.
It is.
I would argue that it is harder than physical fitness for me.
Oh, absolutely. No
Yeah.
question about it. No
Some
question.
of the sessions I've been through, I compared to doing burpees till you throw up, except the emotional version of it. Like,
That's a
that's it.
fantastic visual. I love
Yeah.
it. Yeah, that's perfect. Yeah,
It's
I love
way
that.
harder work, I think. I think
It
it,
is.
it is. And not for everybody, I'm sure, but
Mhm.
yeah, there is a stigma around it. The other
Yes.
thing I wanted to say about protecting yourself and boundaries. I've found, at least for me, that the people you surround yourself with is, like, the most important thing in the world. Maybe especially for us, but I think for everyone, really, because the influence that they have on your life,
Mhm.
positively or negatively, is way more than I ever used to realize.
Oh, yeah.
So being very careful about those people is integral in protecting your essence and your growth. Because if
Totally
you
agree.
don't have the right people, oh man, the toxicity and the turmoil and all of that, it's hard to keep that front sight focus that you were talking about. It's
Mhm.
hard to keep that going when you've got all kinds of, because we've got enough distractions in life as it is.
That's right. Yes,
So let's
absolutely.
control the things we can control.
Totally agree. Totally
And
agree.
be really careful about it. So yeah, we kind of got off on a tangent. That's okay,
Sorry,
right?
everybody. This is what happens when Laura and I get in a room together.
There's not a human on earth, though, that can't relate to this in some way. These are human things that all humans experience. We're putting words to some of them, and you and I have similar experiences, I think, because in some ways we're very similar, and I think
We
that's cool.
are. Well,
Yeah.
and I also don't think that this stuff is unrelated to training at all.
No.
Training is very much a social interaction.
Mhm.
Even if you are training by yourself at the range solo, there are still, social kind of artifacts that affect every decision that you make.
Mhm.
Few human beings are able to completely wall themselves off.
Yeah,
Those
because if you're not talking to someone else, you're talking to yourself.
You are, and that conversation is affected by all the other conversations that you had this week and this year and since
Right.
childhood. So you can't escape the social aspect of pretty much everything we do as human beings.
Mhm.
If you are able to fully escape that, then you might be a sociopath,
Right. Or on
which
drugs.
isn't always a bad thing necessarily. Not all sociopaths are serial killers, but that is yet another obstacle that one would have to overcome.
So I want to ask you a question. This wasn't on my list, but I'm curious, what are some people in your corner that have made just huge impacts in your life?
Well, certainly Tom Givens. I mean,
Yeah.
that would be the first name that comes to mind, especially, if I'm going beyond my nuclear family. Obviously, my mom and dad were my primary influencers. But, Tom Givens is really up there pretty high on the list. And I've told him before, and it's not hyperbole, that he changed my life. And I don't mean that to blow smoke or kiss up or anything like that, but you're talking about, perspective on life and how you view the lens through which you see the world. All of that got flipped upside down by my meeting Tom, training with him, having conversations with him, entertaining his viewpoint on the world, which is very different from mine. Certainly was very different from mine at the time when I first met him, and still is in a lot of ways. But just, if I've said this on I think your show and on other podcasts, and Tom's heard me say it, but there's 1,000 reasons why Tom and I should not be friends at all. Like we're polar opposite humans. The fact that we've been able to cultivate a relationship as strong as the one that we have, the fact that I'm able to consider him a father figure to the point of almost dropping the word figure after it, in spite of our many differences, that's been a huge exercise in self-development for me and growth. And it's helped me to kind of put my money where my mouth is in terms of navigating the nuances of social life. And it's real easy to say, oh, you should accommodate this and understand that and appreciate this and diversity, blah, blah, blah. It's real easy to say that stuff. But if you don't, in your own life, cultivate relationships with people who are totally different from you, then you're all bark and no bite.
All bark and no bite. I love that. You know what I love about life, Tiffany, is that you never know where inspiration's going to come from. You
That's
never
right.
know who is going to come into your life and completely change it in a split second. And that to me is exciting.
It
and
is.
If you don't ever put yourself in a position to accept that or be open to that in any way, it's much less likely to happen. You're much less likely to grow.
And that goes back to your earlier question about why I put myself in social situations in spite of being, a huge introvert. That's part of it. It's this kind of, are you going to live life or are you just going to endure life? I mean, are you, there's one of my favorite lines from one of my favorite TV series. There's a guy that says something along the lines of, I'm dying of survival.
Wow.
That really kind of encapsulates my philosophy on life. To be honest, this might sound a little bit morbid, but I would much rather die at 60 having lived life AF than live till 110 having been super conservative about everything, never taken a chance or a risk. So in these situations where I'm scared or I'm exhausted or it's painful or I feel out of place, I almost have to just take the water's cold, but you know what? I'm just going to jump in and it'll sting for a minute, but eventually I'll get used to it and things will normalize. That's kind of the approach that you have to take sometimes.
That is so good. I love that because we can all relate to that. It doesn't matter our background, our limitations, emotional or physical, any of it. We all as humans can relate to that. And I want to maybe wrap up with something that I think is really important that I want to ask you. And that is for the audience. So if there's someone out there watching this right now and they have some sort of perceived or actual limitation, right? Because we can put limitations on ourselves very easily, easily. What would you say to someone who's watching this right now and they say, gosh, that sounds really good. I would love to someday learn how to take a class and learn how to defend myself, but I just can't do that. I'm not in that category. That won't work for me because fill in the blank. I'm too scared. I'm afraid. What do you say to those people that are thinking like that right now?
Yeah. So first of all, you're not alone. I am you. In that same vein, don't force yourself to be alone. I'm on social media, or you can email me at tiffany@citizensafety.com. I know Laura would love to hear from you. Reach out and talk to somebody about your concerns. That requires risk on your part because you have to put yourself out there and decide to be vulnerable with potentially somebody that you don't know. And that's okay. You do have to govern that and, choose wisely. Maybe you don't feel comfortable emailing me, or maybe you don't feel comfortable talking to a family member about it, but find somebody that you can share this experience with. And then that same strategy applies to, if you do decide to try training, that same strategy applies to instructors. I'm a huge believer in the importance of first impressions for new entrants to the training community. It hurts my heart to hear stories about people whose first training experience was utterly disastrous or traumatic or triggering or alienating in some way, that can have serious repercussions for your entire trajectory for years, not just in the training world, but just in terms of how you approach unfamiliar situations more broadly. Talk to people about making a good decision on that first instructor, and really try and get to know that instructor before you invest in the class. Like, see if that person is on YouTube, watch videos of that person talking, see if you feel comfortable with that person's manner of speech, that person's body language, that person's, does that person smile? Does that person wear dark shades all the time so you can't see through the eyes to the soul? Like, is that person hiding? Is that person always trying to put on a persona or wear a costume or come across as some kind of badass? And does that appeal to you? If not, move on. Don't. I would rather you spend a year vetting instructors before taking your first class than spend a year taking crappy classes that give you, a sour taste in your mouth about training.
Totally agree.
This is the most important step that you'll take in what might become your training journey. So, take as much time as you need. Don't let anybody rush you. Do it when you are ready. But also, you've got to balance that with, you're never ready to feel that cold water.
Yeah.
At some point, you just got to jump in and let things normalize.
Yeah. Oh, that's perfect. I love that, Tiffany. You are so good at being able to help people understand. You unpack things in a way that just makes so much sense to me. I appreciate that about you. And so if people want to learn more about you and Citizen Safety Academy, where can they find you?
Yes, we would love to hear from you. I could tell you the whole story about me and Akil. Akil Kadir is my training partner, and he owns Citizen Safety Academy, and how different our journeys have been. I was one of those people who was afraid and had to jump in spite of fear. So I'd love to share that experience with you if it resonates with you. But if anybody is interested in getting in touch with us, citizenssafety.com is our website. We also have online training. If you are not ready to be in the same room with us, but you want to maybe just kind of get to know us through video online, it's citizenssafetyonline.com is our online training hub.
Oh yeah, you do lots of good work, not only for students, but for instructors as well. I had Tim Reedy on recently, and he he spoke so highly of you. I kept it in the interview too, so you'll have to
Yeah. Well, Tim and I joke that we're co-presidents of the Mutual Admiration Society. So we're constantly one-upping each other in just how much praise we can heap on the other. Tim Reedy walks on water in my eyes. He's an amazing human being, and that's really before you even get to his shooting and instructing capabilities.
Yeah, totally agree with you on that. It was fun to interview him. Really fun. I learned a lot. And I think I might need to become a part of Toastmasters now, because apparently that was part of how he learned to be such a good speaker. But I think that comes a little bit natural to him too. So
I think so too.
Yeah. Well, awesome. That is such good information. I'm glad we were able to unpack that for people. Thank you so much for your time. Yet again, you have now set the record for 3 times on Defenders Live, just dropping gold nuggets and value bombs on the panel.
Well, thank you for having me back. I'm glad that I haven't worn out my welcome yet. So I hope that your loyal audiences are not sick of seeing me yet. Thank you to everybody who's endured yet a third episode of me.
It's worth it every time.